Guys, we are back again here at Metal Mastermind. Your host, Jason Stallworth, and
Ken Candelas. What's
Dude.
up? I'm excited. This is our second podcast.
Yes.
And our first podcast was such a great topic that we had last time. It was all about talking about like things like your inner circle and also preparing your annual plan, and a lot of meaty stuff in our last one, dude.
A lot of meat and potatoes. By the way, guys, so we've got a couple of just short clips on YouTube from that podcast. So make sure you go to the Metal Mastermind YouTube channel and check those out. Of course, to listen to the entire podcast, just listen to it on the source you're listening to right now.
Yes. And, we love everybody tuning in. These sorts of things, these efforts that we're making at Metal Mastermind is just a way to help the everyday, metal musician either get through the day or learn something new to help elevate their career, their playing, their production skills. This is what we're all about. And today, Jason, we want to talk about comparing ourselves to other musicians and finding our own sound or our own style. Let's get into that, man. What are your thoughts? I mean, I know like comparing yourself to other musicians is something we're always told, but right. How do we get over that emotional hurdle? Because it is an emotional hurdle, is it not?
You just nailed it. And guys, this is going to be, no pun intended. Well, you guys know with me, the pun's always intended. This is a heavy topic. And it is emotional, Ken. And I have kind of like, if I were a preacher, this is what I'd preach, don't compare yourself to others. And of course, we're going to talk about something after that. Let's not give that away quite yet, even though it's in the title, finding your own style. But comparing yourself to others is, I would say, it's really tough today. At the time of this podcast, I'm 47 years old. Back in my early days, there was some of that going on, but not as much. People just kind of listened to music and they either liked it and enjoyed it or they didn't, right? You didn't hear people saying, oh, well, he didn't play that fast enough, or this wasn't as technical as it should, blah, 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 blah. He didn't hit that vocal note right. It was more just people enjoying music. Whereas today, I feel that music and musicians have become, some musicians, not all, but have come a bit judgmental. And I think that it's because we have it in front of our face, right? In other words, you can say, Ken, I think this is the best guitar player I've ever heard. And then, Ken, you'll say, well, hang on a second, let me scroll through. You'll find an 11-year-old on the other side of the world that can do it better and faster. And it's just like it becomes this cesspool of really unnecessary judgment. So, yeah, I think it's an issue, man.
Yeah. I think it's also easy to look at the pioneers of this genre and other genres too, right? And this is not just only for metal, but when you look at and you point back to things like, a Dave Mustaine, or Marty Friedman, like these kinds of people that are pioneers in this industry and have a name, but they were also in a time where you have a very select amount of musicians that made it, right?
Right.
So nowadays, I feel like because we have the internet, right, and everybody is able to do their thing, now we have not just, only these legendary pioneers, but we also have a plethora of just new musicians that are technically adept and they have interesting songwriting skills. And, everybody now is being able to, I think we're seeing this wave of like niche music come to fruition because everybody has, their own take on what metal should be or what rock or country or pop or, hip hop. We have so many different things of music coming to light. But I think what I notice are these trends, right? And I feel like because we are living in an age of influencers now, that I think there's a certain mentality of how people are attracting themselves to finding these trends, and they think that that's what they're supposed to sound like. You know what I mean?
Point. Very good point.
those are some things that I feel like I noticed along my journey. And I, like, I'm an educator, so I see this in my students as well. So when you do something different, it's not immediately obvious at first, man. And like we're all inspired by our heroes, right? Like you have your own heroes, I have my own heroes. Like when I was in high school, I was a real big fan of people like Mike Portnoy, because I'm a high school Dream Theater head, and I'm just like, Dream Theater's the best band in high school. So I like totally inspired by this guy, so I still have some of my Portnoy isms in my playing.
Sure.
But I think it's a tough thing for people to step away from what their idols are, or when do they realize that they're just internalizing what their idols are and they're actually doing something from themselves? That's a question that I think we should try and answer. When did you feel like you were going and really creating something original?
The funny thing is, when I started playing guitar in Metallica, that was, I was this is 1989. I discovered them, I think, earlier that year. I took $20 of grass cutting money I had, went out and bought Puppets and Justice. Of course, Justice had come out, in 88. I think Puppets was 86. So
nice.
That was my first love. And then, of course, I got into the hair bands. I got into Guns N' Roses, Whitesnake, Scorpions, Damn Yankees, all these other bands. And some of Megadeth. Later, I got into Megadeth, Slayer, all those guys. But all that said, I think a lot of my style came from really Metallica. I was inspired by them. But I guess one of the things that irks me now, talking about comparing yourself to others, and just the judgment that I see out there sometimes, and this isn't everybody that plays music, understand, this is just, sometimes that negativity you see kind of overshadows everything else if you let it. But I've even heard people say that, well, Kirk Hammett's not all that great. Metallica's not metal. They're just pop now. You might not like the newer Metallica, but it doesn't mean they're not still playing heavy metal. You know what I mean?
Right.
They've just evolved as a band. But I just, again, we're constantly comparing Metallica now to some of the, I guess, heavier bands, if you will. So therefore, we don't call Metallica metal anymore. Some people don't, right? They'll always be heavy metal to me. They were the pioneers of thrash metal, along
Absolutely.
with all the other bands, Death Angel, Testament. I always thought Testament should have been part of the big four,
Yeah.
But I love Skull and Explain. But you know what I'm saying is there just seems to be a lot of judgment and just a lot of comparing. When you see that judgment and the comparisons going on between bands and guitar players, and this person you just scrolled past this shredding away, you start to look at yourself and you start to compare yourself to all these people, and you're like, man, I'm never going to be able to do that. But I think that that's okay, that maybe you're never going to be able to do exactly that, because that's that person's style, right? Your style is always going to be a little bit different. We're going to get into that more later here. But yeah, I think it's very harmful to compare yourself, because it could even cause someone just to either throw in the towel altogether. It's like, screw it. I'm just not going to do this anymore. It's not for me, which I strongly encourage each and every one of you listening right now to never do that. Never give up. I don't care where you're at and you're playing or singing or whatever, but don't just keep pushing yourself to become the best musician you can be, right? Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. But it can cause, I think it can cause some damage though to your psyche if you allow it to.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's, if I were, a youngin' and I heard that, I would greatly appreciate it. Because here's a thought. One of the things that I think helps when you ask a question like, how do you know you're creating something original, and how can you stop comparing yourself? If you haven't made an album before, it's very easy to just compare where you're at right now, because you don't have a tangible product that you can really use as a milestone for your playing.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you haven't made an album or a single or an EP or something like that, then you're comparing to your idols because
Yeah.
that's what you have to go off.
I never answered your question, by the way, real quick. So when I knew that I had my own style, and styles shift, styles evolve, styles grow, and let me just make this point real quick before I share this bit. You may not have just one style. I want everybody to understand that you may love metal music and sometimes like, well, I love metal and everybody expects that from me. So that's what I'm supposed to do. And maybe that's true, but it doesn't mean that you can't have other styles. But that leading into this. So it was probably the mid 90s when I'd been in a band or two before that, early mid 90s, when I formed a band called The Guys. We're a couple of guys or three guys, and we just called ourselves The Guys, just some cool dudes, and
the five guys.
Yeah, the five guys. Yeah, the burgers, right? Yeah. We're half that. But me and one of my closest friends, Eddie, and I met another very, very close friend, Tom, along that journey. We had a few different drummers, but we played some 80s covers, but I was writing the songs. They were not metal, Ken, at all. They were more kind of like almost like pop rock, maybe like Bryan Adams meets the Outfield without, of course, the awesome range that dude had, that sort of stuff. And it was very surprising to my bandmates and to a lot of others, like, okay, Jason plays heavy metal, but this is what he's writing. So I play metal now. We fast forward many, many years after that. In 2013, I released my first instrumental metal album called Apocalyptic Dreams. And every album I've released thereafter has been heavy metal. But I'm looking to go back and record an acoustic style rock driven album at some point in the near future as well. So that's when I know that I started developing my own style. That I had these influences from metal guitar players, but I also loved 80s music from rock to pop to metal. Wasn't really into country or rap, but all the other stuff. So all of that, and then mix in bands that I love, like Nightwish and Amon Amarth, and you kind of mix all that together, with Richard Marx and Bryan Adams. Like, well, you got something kind of different here. So, anyway, hopefully that makes sense to some of you who you've got this one style, but you also have this other stuff inside of you, and I encourage you to let that out. Give that a chance.
I totally understand what you mean, and I feel like in some ways I'm a good example of what that looks like, because my own music is very much inspired by world and ethnic music, and I'm putting that together in a symphonic metal album, and that's like it's like a big melting pot of all these styles. So I totally understand what you mean, and the premise of playing around with all of your influences, despite whether it's don't just disregard something because it's not necessarily from metal. It's got value to add. How, like, there is I think it was called Mute the Saint. It was a band called Mute the Saint, and it was a Indian what do they call those, sitar type.
Sitars.
It was sitar metal. It was so cool, and you have all these different, and and Indian music is very much driven by rhythm patterns, right?
It's really cool, man.
So if you ever listen to, and for those of you who haven't really dived into it, look into it, right? Listen to stuff called konakol. Okay, konakol. It's a vocal rhythmic technique. It's the stuff that you'd hear in Indian music that goes something of the sort like da-ki-da-ga, da-ti-ga-da, stuff like I'm not an expert in it, but it's these vocal intonations that represent like either downbeats or accents in rhythmic music, and they'll use that as an inspiration for like drumming or all this, like, and it was like basically like sitar gent, because it makes sense,
Sitar
right?
gent. That's the new genre, dude.
It was so cool. It was so cool, and that's the kind of stuff that you wouldn't think that would work, but unless you tried it, right? And so these sorts of backgrounds, everybody has their own background and stuff. Like my family is Latino, right? So I have a lot of influence from like salsa and guaguancó and all these types of, genres of the Caribbean. And, I have some of those also, those isms in my music because of just groove and feel and
Yeah.
how I want it to just, express through the music, but I'm doing it in a metal way, you know? So I would also like and just to come back to that point of, if you haven't made an album, right? To experiment with the things that influence you, and one of the things that I would also keep in mind is whatever the music that is in your head, right? To try your very best to interpret that information. One way you can do that is by making a cover song and creating that song how you feel it should have been made, to the best of your abilities, right?
I like that a lot, man. Yeah.
Because if that's one of your influences, right, take that song and be like, oh man, but I could hear all this stuff, and you can just play around with it, right?
Yeah.
And working on doing something that is one that reaches into your roots. So, you know the song really well,
right.
And then you can play around with it. If you're a symphonic metal guy like I am, you'll add an orchestra with it and just play around with the sounds and see what you get. Or maybe you want to do an electronic version of that, or maybe you want to, do a gent version, or you want to do a thrash version. There's all these different types of, ways you can go with it, but you already know the core structure of that song. So that takes away the pressure of having to create the song, right?
Right.
Yeah. Just take an existing song, play around with what you have, and see what comes out of that, right? And try doing something different, right? Because it's like you already know the song, so you could play it exactly as the song is made, right? But what will that show you? Okay, that you can play the song, right? So now
I don't see anything special to that, to be honest with you. And so the band goes up and plays note for note. Well, somebody already wrote that, right? They already just put on the CD, or I guess it's a digital copy these days. No, Ken, and most of you guys listening know, I play live solo acoustic gigs. I kind of go the opposite route. I take a song that's got the full mix, like Summer of '69, Bryan Adams, right?
Yep.
I mentioned the Outfield earlier. I do a couple of their songs. I don't have that guy's vocal range, so a lot of those guys' vocal range from the 80s I don't have, so I transpose them to a key that fits my voice and my style. I play them on acoustic, and I play them different. Now they're recognizable, right? But I add my own twist to it, and I encourage you guys to do the same. Put your own twist to it, and that's a good way to really develop your own style. Well, this is how I'm interpreting this song for me. Well, that's going to help you write your own song, because you start to discover, okay, well, this is the style that's naturally coming out as I'm playing this.
Yeah, and listen to that intuition, man. A lot of this is just, a lot of this again is not obvious, and creating music is a very slow process. It's not a fast thing. Discovering your own sound, that's something that's going to take you years. And when you're in the middle of it, like looking back, I can see, that was a pivotal point when I went in this direction, but while you're in it, it doesn't look as obvious. So
no, it doesn't, man.
You have to give yourself, in a sense, that space and that time, and you can only kind of go with your gut as where it's going to take you. So you got to trust what your gut's telling you, because you're going to find that is going to be the most natural way that you also start to make music, right? And now
you're talking about metal, Ken. You're doing the symphonic metal. This is kind of symphonic, cinematic metal. It's got some death metal vocals, but dude, you're also in a rock band that's really nothing like what you're doing with Homeric. So that's a good example there, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and play with other people. That's an important part of it too. Yeah. I feel very strongly that a lot of my creativity was spurred by the presence of others. So,
that makes sense.
And if you're in a situation like I am, where, my baby, which is Homeric, is the brainchild of what I do, but it's a project that I am, at the end of the day, solely responsible for.
Yeah, it's on you.
This other band that I play with, Four Trips Ahead, that's a that's a heavy metal band. It's a real band that I go in and I literally offer myself as the drummer of the band. I'm not like this, mastermind behind all this stuff. I am a performer and I am a songwriter in the band, but I arrange everything with everybody in the band, and that helps challenge me because, you want to surround yourself with people in this case that are, at the same level or better than you. And, these are, musicians that I respect very highly. So when I'm around them, we always, we'll screw around and we'll have fun. But at the end of the day, we always get down to business and we always work on our craft. And, if you have that kind of environment, it's very, very nurturing to your performance and development and your songwriting. Because now you're naturally not only tapping into just, you being on the computer at home and just doing this, right? But you're also really immersing yourself and using that musical intelligence that you already have that's inside you. And you're sharing that with others and feeding that off of others. And you're able to sort of see, okay, whether this was a good idea or, I noticed this flaw in my playing. Right. And then those are things that you can work on, and that's a very important part of being a musician. You have to play with other people.
And you got to give them room though, too. And this better than anyone, and as I've played in other bands, you've got to give the other musicians plenty of room to integrate their own styles, right? Their core style and your core style may be a little different, but what you can bring together can be something really just a beautiful creation. So allowing them to express their styles musically, whether it be voice or guitar, bass, drums, whatever, and then being a part of that kind of changes you a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right.
It changes your perspective. It's like, okay, it's not just me, or the way I play. I'm playing my style, but I hear what this person's doing over here and that one's doing over there. So let me change things up to fit, to build something together, right? So that can be a very beautiful thing, and it can really change you in a good way.
Yeah, I was actually just watching this video yesterday for one of my classes, and it was an interview with the film score composer Hans Zimmer.
Oh.
And he was talking to I think it was Vanity Fair, and he was telling them about how he communicates to his musicians with his compositions. And it's actually really funny. He will just tell them, this, like a flautist, the person who plays the flute, he'll tell them, don't just play the flute. He says in this, and it was for the movie Dune. So if you've ever seen the movie Dune, it's like a, sand, wasteland, right? Yeah. So he's just like, I want you to play as if you were the winds of dunes in sand, right? And the guys just kind of looking at him, kind of like, okay, dude, I'll try. And he'll like literally like in his articulation and technique, he's got that in his head now. You know, he is the performer, right? He is the representation of this wind that Hans Zimmer's asking for, right? So, now he's doing things, and he's doing it a little bit unorthodox, because what is Hans Zimmer asking for? He's not asking for a traditional performance, right?
The wind is unorthodox, right? The wind can change at any moment. So and
that's a very important lesson. It's being able that when you're composing, right, and you're having people on your project, and you're giving them the instruction of what it is. Give them a little bit of the liberty to interpret the music. Yeah. And we actually talked about this last time, right? Which is like old composers, European composers like Bach and all these people, they would write the music, but they always knew that it was going to have to be interpreted, right? Right. So they couldn't, it's not like they're writing MIDI. I mean, they didn't even know what MIDI was, right? So, so they're talking, and they're saying, okay, I know I can only write so much, because at the end of the day, people are imperfect, and they're going to interpret this in some way, shape, or form. And each performance is always going to be a little bit different, which is so cool,
That is true. I did the same thing with Cameron Fleury, who did the drums for my last album, Masterpiece, and the one Overcometh that I've been sitting on for almost 2 years now. But I sent him the drum program that I programmed the drums for. Just this is what I needed to write the rhythms for the songs and the songs themselves. And he asked, "Do you want me to follow this?" I'm like, "No. You don't have to follow any of it unless you want to, if you want to do something similar. But I want you to have the ultimate freedom because you're a drummer. I'm not a drummer. Yeah, I hear certain things and I could do that myself. I could tell the drummer, well, I want you to play exactly this, but why do that? Now my song is I'm going to be the weakest link in my song. Had I done that, right? Instead, I gave him, and I would give any musician just the complete openness. Hey, do what you feel because I'm hiring you for that reason, right? I want your interpretation, and that's going to make the song that much better.
Yeah, and I would also kind of put to that is that what you're giving them is a guideline,
Right.
and I'm sure they're like in many music, like if you were to play like a Steely Dan record, and you were Bernard Purdy, the drummer who played, on these records. Like they were given sheet music. They were given that as session musicians, so they had to play, something that was pretty accurate to what they wanted. But there was also the flavor that was in it, right? That's what Bernard Purdy brought to the table. And that's why they always kept calling Bernard Purdy, because he had a feel that was unique, right? So you're doing this and you're thinking, okay, well, why do we have all these different types of drummers and guitar players, bass players, vocalists, right? Everybody's unique. Like, sure, there are many different people who can do, screaming growl vocals, but like there's only one corpse grinder, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got your own sound and how you approach that. And it's always about, does it serve this? And I'm holding my hands up here because it's like, this is the song, right? The idea,
big picture,
right?
Man, yeah.
It's never about me or the ego, right? You gotta take away the ego, because at the end of the day, it's all about what's the song needing from you, and you are just like a channel. You're a muse, and you're using it to just kind of feed that idea. Like I'll we last episode we talked about your inner circle, and I had mentioned I had some bandmates that I had to disassociate from.
Yep.
Every time I listen to my my first album, which included those bandmates, I still genuinely enjoy the album.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Because
that's good. You can say that
because it's I'm listening to the music that was created, and I'm not listening to it as just an egotistical, like screw this guy or this gal or whatever, because at the end of the day, we did a great job. And that was what was important. I've even had certain people talk to me and say, well, I don't like what they did, but I still like the music. And it's like, well, that's totally fine, because that's what it was about. It was about the music, and that's what you needed to really keep in mind, right? So if you have a great music, like, it doesn't matter who's in it. It's always going to have that element of greatness. So,
sure.
You can't take it away from that. And that's important. It's like that's the thing. It's like music separates all of us from the entity that it is, right? Yeah. We all want to take credit for doing it, but if it's a good song, it's a good song, and it'll hold itself on its own 2 feet.
And by the way, I think we merged into our second topic about 15 minutes ago, finding your own style. Just to kind of everything we've been talking about has really been catered to helping you guys, helping us find our own style. There's sometimes, Ken, where I don't know if I've actually, really discovered myself musically. But then if I really step back and think about that, okay, well, I did when I released my album in 2013. That was who I was at that time when I had formed the band, The Guys. Well, that's what I was doing at that time.
Right.
We had to allow ourselves to evolve. And I think that evolution does have to be, I don't want to overuse the word organic because we just label everything organic these days, but I do think that needs to be an organic transition into what your next phase is as a musician, right? What are you evolving into? You may be going a heavier route. You may not be going a heavier. Like I feel myself right now, Ken. I'm kind of, as soon as I'm finished with this one album, I've got 2 projects I'm going to be working on this year, but one of them is again more of kind of like a rock acoustic type thing, right? Now, does that mean my entire style is going to change? Not so much, but for this next project, it is going to evolve a bit, right? Now, the one after that, I may decide to do a death metal project down the road. Who knows, right? But you just have to give yourself that freedom, I think, to do that and understand that whatever your style is, it's not wrong, right? As metalheads, sometimes we can go back to that whole comparing musicians and the realm of judgment there and be like, well, that's not metal enough, but if it's whatever is in you at that time, I think you have to release that. You have to get that out. It might be a lighter version. It might be a heavier version. You may be more of a rock guitar player, but you're starting to go to this extreme, black metal route. Hey, let that be the path, as long as that's truly organic and it's truly, boiling up within you. Or it might be completely the opposite, right? You might be into extreme metal writing that, but you might pick up your acoustics like, you know what? I'm really enjoying this right now. Hey, let it be, right? There's no wrong answer here. So, but going back to comparing yourself, guys, Ken and I will both just hammer you over the head, right? And tell you, do not compare yourself to other musicians or to anyone for that matter.
Yeah, but it's a slow burn, dude. It's a slow burn. I think for seasoned musicians, it's a little easier for us to understand that. Because we've spent the time and the hours, perfecting our craft. But even being like a seasoned musician, you could be a seasoned musician and only play covers all your life too. I think anybody who's really in the mindset of trying to do something original, it's a commitment. You're making a commitment to yourself. That is, I'm not satisfied with just learning other people's music or using other people's music. You want to do something that's bigger than that. And you want to make your own legacy. And that's, partially what it comes down to. It's your contribution to the world. So, it's a sacred thing, and like through all the hardship that I've gone through with my own project, I've never once said, yeah, I'm just going to hang the towel and that's it. Because at my core, it's like a conflict of my own code. It's like my body does not compute giving up on this creative endeavor because it's something that has to be coming out of me in this world. If you don't feel that way about your music, then you're not taking it seriously. This is a craft that is a representation of your being, and if you, and I tell students all the time, music industry is not easy. People will say, of course, oh, you could probably find better ways to make money, and they're probably right.
Yeah, they're probably right.
They're probably right, but you're not doing music because you wanted to make bank. You're doing music because this is what was calling you, and you can't see yourself doing anything else. Okay. So if it's not for that first reason, then I would strongly consider what it is that you're doing, because again, this is a craft. This is a sacred pilgrimage for many of us, a journey of our lifetime, and once you're a musician, you're always a musician, but not every musician is a songwriter. Okay.
That's so true. Yeah.
If you're a songwriter and you're creating original music, you have to treat it as a religious pact to yourself.
Yeah.
that this is something that comes from, call it a higher power. This is why, by the way, okay, many old composers back in the Renaissance, back in the Baroque period, this is why they made a lot of holy music. Okay, they felt that their musical ability was given to them by God, right?
It's
And I'm
inspired by
not,
God. Yeah.
and I'm not a religious person, but this is what they believe, and they felt it was from a higher power. That's why they created all these different types of masses and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, for all the secular music that they could have done, look at all the freaking religious music they did with that.
Oh,
You know?
absolutely, man. Yeah.
So it's telling you something just about that, and that's my word of advice. Take it as seriously as a commitment to, a higher power, a higher entity, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But that is channeling through you in order to create this wonderful piece of music that is unlike any other, because it is yours.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And along with that, guys, if you're not creating daily habits that push you further towards that goal of writing original music, right, then you need to make a schedule. You need to get to doing that, because that's a big thing too. We're kind of getting to more of a practical side of things here. Do not compare yourself to others. Do not do that. Okay, don't, because you're not that person, and guess what? They are not you. Understand that whatever's coming out of you organically, like we're talking about here, well, guess what? No one can do that as well as you can, right? Because that's your inspiration. That's coming from deep within. But now, to get that right, you have to practice. Okay, I know we're getting kind of on the, well, yeah, I know I need to practice, but you'd be surprised on how many people, musicians and people that want to do great things with their life, they dream up this pie in the sky. Well, I want this, but they're not taking those steps. So on that note, I would say no pun intended, but it's definitely intended. On that note, guys, remember, we at Metal Mastermind, if you go to metalmastermind.com, you can get into our courses specific to rock and metal musicians. So I want to encourage you to definitely check those out, guys.
Yeah, it's going to be something that is a tool. Okay.
Right.
I always look at these things as a tool, and, helping you along your journey. Your journey is always going to be unique to you. But if we can help you in any way in that regard, look at what we offer and see if that's what's right for you. We're also very open to our community. Join our Discord by signing up to our email lists. And you will get access to the community where we have like-minded people who are very, very supportive and want to see each other grow. And, show yourself off, see what you got, and, potentially collaborate with others. That's what Metal Mastermind offers you as the listener and as a student. So I hope you and Jason, we both hope you guys take the action that we know is going to help you in your musical career. So with that, thanks so much.
Yeah, guys, thank you. And until next time, always remember to create your own sound.